He denies he's the father of your 13-month-old daughter, Sine. That Ms. Nichols was already pregnant when you began your relationship.
Well, she doesn't like the fact that I moved on and I have a new relationship. She's been lying since the first time I met her.
He started denying my daughter before his new relationship because he was cheating.
Really?
I've known Mr. Young for 19 years.
Wanted to see me, and as soon as she came over, she was still on the same thing she was when I first met her, trying to get back in the bed with me like always. I mean, no, there was no instant connection like that. I mean,
Your Honor,
I was getting out of a relationship. We started
I was
dating
living
again.
with a roommate that was moving to Georgia, and his family member that he was living with at the time said, well, Tasha, come on and stay with us.
An entire year?
An entire year.
And during that time, you all were having a sexual relationship as well?
Only that,
yes.
You said
everything begins with tension so thick it becomes part of the air itself. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the atmosphere is not theatrical but heavy with real human stakes, broken trust, abandoned promises, and a desperate search for clarity. It is the kind of room where people arrive convinced they know the truth, yet leave understanding how fragile their own memories can be. This description follows the emotional progression, legal complexity, and psychological unraveling taking place as families confront questions of biology, responsibility, and justice. The courtroom opens its doors to the first case, and the energy shifts the moment the parties walk in. A mother who insists her child deserves recognition sits on one side. A man convinced he is being trapped sits on the other. The tension between them is visible long before a single word is spoken. The mother speaks with urgency. She wants responsibility, acknowledgement, and emotional closure. The man counters with suspicion, claiming she had other relationships and motives rooted in financial gain. Each side believes their narrative is the truth, but the legal world knows that facts must be proven, not felt. Judge Lauren Lake listens closely. Her courtroom is a place where emotional claims meet legal standards, where the evidence stage in divorce case principles often appear even in paternity hearings, because the same forces are at play: betrayal, doubt, and the fear that love was never real. She governs the exchange with precision, reminding everyone that the courtroom is not a battlefield of insults but an arena for clarity. As the arguments unfold, the keywords that shape real family disputes surface naturally. The conversation of a DNA test becomes the centerpiece, not only as a scientific tool, but as a catalyst for emotional conflict. It becomes clear that people often regret taking such tests, not because the science is flawed, but because people regret taking a DNA test when the truth threatens the stories they built their lives on. The courtroom sees this regret unfold in real time, as secrets of past relationships emerge and both sides confront uncomfortable realities. Judge Lauren Lake approaches each detail analytically. She reminds everyone that truth changes everything, and in her courtroom, truth is not optional. It is the foundation upon which justice must be built. She understands that the relationship between law and justice is complicated. Law requires proof, justice requires honesty, and families often struggle to supply either. From the file you uploaded, the first story centers around Ms. Nichols and Mr. Young, a pair tied together by a long history, emotional dependency, and unresolved bitterness. They enter the courtroom both believing they have been wronged. Ms. Nichols insists Mr. Young is the father of her daughter Sanny, pointing to their shared living situation, their long-term connection, and his presence early in the child's life. Mr. Young counters aggressively, claiming she had additional partners, including a much older man he labels her sugar daddy. Their accusations unfold rapidly, fueled by years of resentment. Is the sugar daddy the father? The court hears about the accusations of cheating stories, conflicting timelines, and the chaotic overlap between relationships. The description of a 73-year-old friend providing financial help becomes a point of tension. Mr. Young repeatedly insists this older man is the real father, leaning on color comparisons, accusations of hidden intimacy, and personal insecurities. The courtroom becomes a microcosm of the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where subjective fears and personal narratives collide with factual inquiry. Judge Lake keeps the courtroom aligned with formal procedure. She draws upon legal principles similar to the adverse inference in Evidence Act, questioning motives when people conceal information or change their stories. She requests clarification, challenges inconsistencies, and ultimately reminds both parties that justice demands transparency. The evidence continues with discussions of relationship instability, social media conflicts, and the emotional collapse that followed their breakup. The judge listens with calm discipline as both sides present their stories. She sees a pattern: two people who once shared affection now using the courtroom to validate their pain. At the same time, she continuously redirects them toward the only issue that matters: the child's identity and well-being. When the polygraph is introduced, it becomes a moment that shifts the courtroom's emotional gravity. The mother admits to previous sexual contact with the older man but firmly denies intercourse during the relationship with Mr. Young. The polygraph supports one part of her claim and contradicts another. The tension spikes. Mr. Young becomes visibly agitated. His disbelief grows into frustration, revealing how deeply emotional truth can override legal truth. Yet forensic results, not feelings, guide Judge Lake's analysis. Is the sugar daddy the father? The courtroom description deepens when witnesses join: new partners, family members, and past acquaintances. Each one adds layers to the story. A new girlfriend offers an unexpectedly measured viewpoint, acknowledging the possibility that the child could indeed be his. Her presence complicates the emotional landscape, demonstrating how relationships intertwine in paternity cases, sometimes forming unexpected alliances with justice. Judge Lauren Lake's tone becomes instructional. She addresses both adults as if reminding them that parental responsibility must transcend their personal grudges. She emphasizes how children absorb energy, anger, resentment, fear, and how adults must shield them from emotional fallout. These reflections echo themes discussed often in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where acknowledgement of personal flaws becomes the first step toward healing. The test results in the first case deliver undeniable clarity. Mr. Young is the biological father. The truth dismantles all his theories about timelines, colors, and alternative partners. He breaks down emotionally. In this moment, the courtroom becomes not only a legal forum but a psychological awakening. He must now face a new reality, one where responsibility cannot be avoided. The judge's final words after the results reveal the deeper meaning of the case: that truth, scientific, legal, and emotional, forces people to transform. She reminds them to break destructive cycles, echoing themes often discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals recognize that justice is not just about the verdict, but about creating the conditions for change. As the first case closes, the courtroom transitions into a second one, carrying forward the same themes: long-term relationships, fractured trust, concealed infidelities, and the fear of raising a child who may not biologically belong to the man claiming paternity. The environment shifts, but the emotional formula remains: hope, doubt, accusation, and anticipation. Is the sugar daddy the father? The next pair enters the courtroom burdened with unresolved history. 11 years of on-and-off relationships, accusations of cheating, financial disputes, and family interference form the background. Their argument is tangled in unpaid debts, claims about a child support burden, and a $750 down payment for a car that now symbolizes broken promises rather than shared progress. The courtroom feels noticeably heavier. The mother states her reasons for calling off a wedding, while the father counters with claims that her past infidelity creates biological uncertainty. They bring in relatives, sisters, mothers, as if the truth must be built from a collective narrative rather than individual memory. The environment mirrors real episodes of adoption stories, full episodes, where identity becomes a shared responsibility. Judge Lake listens but does not indulge chaos. She calls out disrespectful behavior, especially when the father shows verbal aggression. She reminds him that the way he speaks to women, whether in public or in private, reflects deeper behavioral issues that affect children. Her warnings echo the philosophical discussions often held on the Divorce Course podcast, where emotional maturity is emphasized as a legal necessity, not a personal preference. As evidence unfolds, it becomes clear that timeframes overlap just enough to create doubt. The father claims he needs clarity before committing to full responsibility. The mother insists his doubt only emerges when they argue. The grandmother expresses concern for her grandchildren's stability. The courtroom becomes a rotating lens through which the complexities of adult relationships are exposed. When the DNA results are read, the outcome confirms that he is indeed the father. His reaction is one of emotional collapse mixed with relief. The mother responds with frustration, insisting she knew the truth from the start. The courtroom witnesses both the healing and reopening of emotional wounds within seconds. Judge Lake concludes with her signature blend of empathy and stern guidance. She instructs them to stop the destructive back-and-forth dynamic and to create a stable environment for their children. Her words resonate like a lecture on the relationship between law and justice, making clear that justice demands more than truth. It requires consistent, responsible behavior. As the previous case settles and emotions begin to cool, Judge Lauren Lake prepares for yet another emotionally charged hearing. Another story where the law must interpret tangled human relationships, and where truth again becomes the only stabilizing force. The courtroom does not rest. Issues shift, parties change, but the underlying themes of abandonment, suspicion, trauma, and broken trust remain the constant heartbeat of these hearings. The next case in the uploaded file begins with a new mother, Ms. Greenhouse, who arrives with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Her appearance tells a silent story, one of trying to hold a life together despite relationship instability, financial pressure, and emotional turbulence. She stands before Judge Lauren Lake claiming that the man she shared more than a decade of her life with is now disowning their 7-month-old child. She frames her presence in court as a necessity, not a choice. In her voice, the courtroom can hear the exhaustion of a long, burdensome relationship and the resilience of a woman determined to protect her children's future. Is the sugar daddy the father? On the other side of the courtroom stands Mr. Thompson, a man who appears equally weary but for entirely different reasons. His doubt is not casual. It has metastasized through years of mistrust, unresolved disputes, and interference from family members. His position is clear. He believes the child may not be his, largely due to events he associates with a short break in their relationship. He claims she admitted to intimacy with another man during that time, a detail that now controls his entire narrative. His body language shows agitation, restlessness, and defensiveness. In his mind, these hearings are the only way to protect himself from emotional manipulation. Financial responsibility for a child he doubts is biologically tied to him, and what he perceives as past betrayal. The courtroom becomes a reflection of the relationship between law and justice, especially in family court settings. Justice requires fairness, balance, and clear standards. Law demands evidence, proof, and rational evaluation. But the people involved operate through emotion, memory, and fear. Judge Lauren Lake must continuously align their tumultuous feelings with legal structure. The mother explains that their relationship spanned 11 years, years filled with breakups, reconciliations, renewed hope, and recurring disappointment. She describes him as insecure, controlling, and repeatedly accusing her of cheating without basis. She insists that she cut ties with her own family at times to sustain the relationship, sacrificing emotional support networks because she believed their union could still be saved. These choices reveal a dynamic familiar in many cheating stories and long-term relationship collapses. The slow erosion of trust through cumulative, unresolved conflicts. Is the sugar daddy the father? The father counters with a version of reality in which he carried the emotional burden of keeping the family together. He claims he was the one who always returned, always tried, always attempted reconciliation. His perspective, though conflicting with hers, reveals his own emotional wounds, fear of abandonment, resentment toward her family's influence, and the belief that external forces corrupted their relationship. He describes the mother as involved with multiple partners during their break, a claim the mother rejects entirely. Whether true or not, the doubt shapes his identity as a father. Doubt, in legal terms, becomes a matter requiring verification. In emotional terms, it becomes a barrier to bonding. This is where Judge Lauren Lake's steady presence becomes crucial. She guides the conversation, unraveling the layers of history carefully. She does not allow the pair to drown the courtroom in noise or personal attacks. Instead, she returns them again and again to the core question: who is the child's biological father? She emphasizes that the courtroom is not a stage for rehearsing grievances, but a structured environment for truth. And in this truth-seeking process, parallels appear to legal principles like the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act, reminding both parties that withheld information or inconsistent statements weaken credibility. Witnesses enter the courtroom, adding further complexity. The mother's sister testifies about the events in the hospital, insisting that the father rejected the idea of a DNA test at birth. Her testimony paints a picture of a man who once embraced fatherhood confidently, only to retreat into doubt when the relationship deteriorated. She speaks with a tone reflecting both familial protectiveness and frustration. Her account attempts to solidify that the father once believed in the child's legitimacy. The father's mother then speaks, describing her son as a dedicated parent and emphasizing her concerns about inconsistencies in the child's physical appearance. She comments on head shape, skin tone, and family traits as if trying to perform her own genetic analysis. Her testimony reflects a common phenomenon in paternity disputes, families grasping at visual clues to affirm or deny biological ties. But Judge Lake ensures the court remembers that genetics cannot be determined by comparison alone. She reminds the family that science, not speculation, must guide conclusions. As emotional exchanges escalate, the judge calls for order repeatedly. She highlights the destructive communication patterns between the parents, their frequent insults, their inability to speak calmly, and their willingness to argue even while being instructed to stop show why the relationship has dissolved. Judge Lake's frustration is evident, but so is her compassion. She acknowledges the pain beneath their hostility and reminds them that the child's well-being must come first. The mother brings forward a financial dispute. The $750 she claims she paid as a down payment for a car intended for their family. This financial strain is presented as further evidence of her investment in the relationship. But when questioned, she cannot provide documentation proving the money came from her. And when the father denies receiving her payment, the courtroom sees an example of the challenges surrounding verbal agreements, shared finances, and trust erosion. Judge Lake, examining the evidence with legal precision, denies the repayment claim due to lack of proof. This decision reflects the fundamental principle that justice requires verifiable facts, not emotional assertions. The emotional climax of the second case arrives with the handling of the DNA results. The tension is palpable. The courtroom quiets. The parents fall silent, witnesses sit upright, and Judge Lake prepares to deliver the truth that will redefine their future. When the result confirms that Mr. Thompson is the biological father, the entire emotional framework shifts instantly. Is the sugar daddy the father? The father displays a mixture of shock, relief, and internal conflict. He must now reconcile the fact that his doubts, however understandable, were unfounded. The mother reacts with frustration, insisting she knew the truth all along. Her frustration is not anger at him for doubting, but anger that doubt overshadowed the joy of early parenthood. The air becomes heavy with the realization that months of emotional tension could have been avoided if communication between them had been healthier. Judge Lauren Lake transitions seamlessly into an advisory figure. She urges them to break the toxic habits that plague their relationship. She does not shame them. Instead, she provides a reality check grounded in both law and emotional wisdom. Her tone reflects the discussions often heard in Truth Changes Everything podcast or the Divorce Course podcast, where emotional accountability is recognized as a cornerstone of functional co-parenting. She reminds them that they cannot continue with destructive communication patterns, not if they intend to raise children who do not inherit their emotional dysfunction. As the courtroom settles from this emotional weight, the final major case from your uploaded file begins, a case involving Ms. Diaz and Mr. Allen. This case introduces a different kind of conflict, distance between states, confusion over timelines, and the complexity of broken-up couples who still drift toward each other emotionally despite trying to move on. The mother enters the courtroom with the quiet certainty that her child's father is standing across the room. The father enters with the firm belief that distance and timing make it biologically impossible. Unlike the previous cases, this one is anchored in geography. Mr. Allen insists he was in Tennessee when conception allegedly occurred in Indiana. He argues that the relationship had ended, that both of them were involved with other people, and that their paths were no longer entangled during the conception window. His claim is not founded on emotional betrayal alone, but on practical logic, physical presence. He argues that no man can father a child in a state he was not present in, unless one imagines impossible scenarios. He speaks with a defensive firmness that masks his uncertainty. Ms. Diaz, however, presents an entirely different story. According to her, they spent Easter together, a holiday she vividly remembers. She anchors her memory in details such as meals, shopping, and shared time. She insists the timeline aligns perfectly with medical calculations. Her certainty is not rooted in speculation, but in lived experience. She believes the child looks nothing like her, yet believes wholeheartedly he is biologically linked to Mr. Allen. Witness testimony disrupts the narrative. The father's cousin testifies that they were together in Tennessee during Easter, describing meals and activities that contradict the mother's claims. Yet the details he offers, hamburgers and hot dogs, feel more aligned with summer gatherings than Easter celebrations, fueling doubt. The contrast between their stories reveals how easily human memory can reshape itself around emotional needs. Is the sugar daddy the father? Judge Lauren Lake handles this case with extraordinary patience. She navigates the contradictions with careful questioning. She reminds the courtroom that timelines, memories, and emotions can all mislead. Only DNA can offer irrefutable truth. Her tone embodies the principle behind the game-changing attorney podcast, where evidence, not opinion, defines justice. The father's motivations become clearer during questioning. He admits he did not know his own biological father. He grew up without a clear identity and wants to break that pattern. His emotional conflict becomes visible. He may doubt the biology, but he has already begun forming an attachment to the child, treating him as his own despite uncertainty. His willingness to step up reflects themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront generational wounds to build healthier futures. When the DNA results confirm that he is the biological father, the courtroom experiences another profound emotional shift. The father tears up, not out of fear or regret, but relief and gratitude. For the first time, he has a biological connection he understands. The mother reacts with vindication, insisting she always knew the truth. The judge acknowledges their emotional journeys and encourages them to use this truth as a foundation for healthier co-parenting. With the final case resolved and the truth revealed, the courtroom momentarily rests in a fragile quiet. But this silence is not emptiness. It is the aftershock of emotional confrontation. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, truth never arrives gently. It arrives like a force that resets every relationship it touches, leaving people to rebuild their identities around a new reality. The final moments of the uploaded cases demonstrate why this courtroom has become a space where painful stories transform into opportunities for clarity, responsibility, and renewal. The revelation that Mr. Allen is the biological father of young Jordan brings a shift not only for him, but for the generational story he carries. He acknowledges that unlike his own childhood, where he did not know his biological father and grew up with unanswered questions, his son will never carry that same burden. This is the emotional through-line of the entire case. A young man confronting the fear of repeating history and instead choosing to break the cycle. Is the sugar daddy the father? Judge Lauren Lake recognizes this. In her tone, the courtroom feels the weight of her experience. She knows that fatherhood is not defined merely by DNA, yet the confirmation gives him an anchor. She also sees the mother's relief, her vindication, and her lingering frustration that this truth took so long to be acknowledged. She speaks to both with an even balance of compassion and firmness, ensuring they understand that truth is only the beginning. What they build after truth is what determines justice. These last emotional exchanges reflect the broader themes that run through every story in the uploaded file. They show the fragile line between law and love, between responsibility and avoidance, and between fear and honesty. They illustrate the emotional battles commonly discussed in Truth Changes Everything podcast, where the idea of truth as a transformative force becomes central. They echo the legal insights explored in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where attorneys analyze cases where evidence reshapes lives. And they embody the human pain that surfaces in cheating stories, where infidelity, real or suspected, creates emotional fractures that ripple into legal disputes. In these cases, the courtroom's role intensifies because the questions cannot be resolved privately. The people involved do not trust each other, and history has weakened their ability to communicate. Every family appearing before Judge Lauren Lake carries fear that truth may betray them, fear that love was not enough, or fear that responsibility will be imposed without fairness. The judge must transform that fear into clarity, using both legal authority and human empathy. As the final case concludes, the courtroom environment shifts again. Families gather their feelings, witnesses step aside, and the echoes of raised voices fade. But Judge Lauren Lake does not allow the parties to leave with unresolved wounds. She understands that truth without guidance is merely revelation. Truth with guidance becomes transformation. And so she continues, offering closing insights that reflect the core values behind the concept of justice in jurisprudence. She emphasizes that justice does not merely declare who is right and who is wrong. It demands accountability. It requires adults to act in the best interests of children, who rarely understand the chaos unfolding around them. Children, in these cases, are silent participants, yet the most profoundly affected. Judge Lake often reminds parents that their children absorb the emotional environment around them, whether through arguments, resentments, or emotional coldness. She stresses that co-parenting demands maturity, even when romantic relationships fall apart. Her words also reflect principles heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals recognize the need to confront their flaws honestly. The parents in each case must now confront their past choices, misunderstandings, and broken communication. They must adjust their behavior for the sake of their children, not for the sake of winning arguments. This emphasis on healing rather than punishment distinguishes family court from other legal settings. In reviewing the uploaded file's final emotional threads, it becomes clear how each story shares a common pattern. 1. A long history of entanglement. Every story involves couples who have known each other for years, or even decades. Their relationships contain overlapping timelines, breakups, reunions, and unresolved conflicts. This creates emotional complexity that often requires legal intervention. 2. Conflicts over truth. Whether it is a disputed timeline, accusations of cheating, or confusion about geography, each case centers around uncertainty. This uncertainty breeds resentment. People interpret gaps in memory, changes in behavior, and inconsistencies in stories as signs of betrayal. 3. Family influence. Witnesses, mothers, girlfriends, cousins, sisters, play significant roles. Their testimonies reveal how family members can unintentionally escalate conflict. Their involvement often adds layers of tension, as everyone believes they are protecting their loved one. 4. Fear of responsibility. In each case, the alleged father expresses fear, not always of the child, but of being emotionally or financially trapped. These worries manifest during arguments about child support, accusations about motives, or concerns about stability. 5. Transformation through evidence. When the DNA test results arrive, each time, they reshape the emotional architecture of the room. These moments prove why scientific truth remains central in a courtroom governed by human emotion. The DNA test becomes the ultimate arbiter, revealing not only biology, but also the emotional integrity of the people involved. Judge Lake's handling of these elements demonstrates her deep understanding of the relationship between law and justice. She navigates emotional storms while grounding every decision in structure and fairness. Her approach acknowledges that people often enter the courtroom believing that justice favors whichever side feels most hurt. But she teaches them that justice instead favors clarity, responsibility, and honesty. In the final reflections of the uploaded file, the cases illustrate how paternity court intersects with broader legal and psychological frameworks, similar to discussions found in evidence stage in divorce case analysis. These disputes are not merely about determining biological fathers. They represent the unraveling and rebuilding of families. They expose the complexities of human behavior, how affection becomes resentment, how promises fade into doubt, and how fear distorts memory. The emotional threads in these cases also mirror themes of adoption stories' full episodes, where identities shift based on new information. In paternity court, discovering a father can be just as life-altering as discovering one is not. Identity shapes itself around truth, not speculation. Judge Lake's final statements in these cases establish a consistent message. Truth has arrived, and now responsibility must follow. For Mr. Young, fatherhood must now be embraced with maturity, not anger. For Mr. Thompson, co-parenting must move beyond shouting matches. For Mr. Allen, fatherhood becomes an opportunity to build the life he never had growing up. These transformations do not erase past pain, but they provide a foundation for healthier futures. The courtroom transforms for a moment into a place not of conflict, but of possibility, a space where patterns can break, cycles can end, and new beginnings can form. Each parent, upon leaving, carries a new responsibility, not just to their child, but to themselves. They must unlearn patterns of accusation, insecurity, and avoidance. They must adopt new behaviors aligned with stability, cooperation, and emotional maturity. These values reflect the broader societal understanding found in podcasts, recovery stories, and legal discourse. They emphasize that healing begins only after truth is accepted. And this is the lasting image of the courtroom, as described from your uploaded file. A space where scientific evidence meets human vulnerability. A space where Judge Lauren Lake balances authority with compassion. A space where families confront their deepest fears and discover answers they cannot escape. A space where truth is not merely uncovered, it is lived, carried, and transformed into a new narrative.